Welcome back, parents. Listen, I have been feeling super grateful for the guests that have been willing to come on our show and volunteer their time, take time out of their day, and come on and share their experience and their expertise with us to just bless our parent community. So, if you have been on our show in the past, thank you. A huge shout out to you for blessing our parents, and today is no exception. We have an awesome Colorado native on our show today. She is married, has 3 kids, has authored 2 books, and has been speaking out in the world for 15 years. So, welcome to the show, Lauren Reitsema.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm so happy to be here.
Listen, you and I met at an event, a speaking event, where you were the featured speaker. And it was an event for parents put on by one of the local schools. And I instantly connected with you when you started talking. First of all, I love how you move around and walk around while you're talking because it helps me to focus on what you're saying. So kudos to you for that style. Also, you're just such a light to the world. I mean, you've got this radiant smile and your passion just emanates from you. So it was such a wonderful talk that you gave about how growing up, in your family in Colorado, you experienced something that was very difficult, and that was the divorce of your parents after almost 20 years of marriage. And you shared with us how that influenced what you're doing today in your career. And so I was hoping you could just kind of jump right in with that same origin story and share with our parent community that very same thing.
Of course, I'd be delighted. I can appreciate somebody who also doesn't love a podium. I don't like to stand behind anything because one, I'm really small and it just hides me from the
Yes.
audience. But mostly I just think the energy of movement is a part of how I'm made. So I'm glad that you appreciated that. Yeah, you hit it you're spot on. I think most kids, as they're leaving for college, are looking for a vocation or something to learn that can jumpstart a career. And in my case, I was looking for something that I didn't even know I needed, but it was an understanding of the why. My family was split, and I was now a child of divorce at 18. And I was in a place that I wanted to leave, Colorado. I love this state. I love that I'm raising my kids here now. And it was a season I didn't want to be close to my family. I didn't want to be close to home because home in that time was very different and very split and exhausting emotionally. As most children of divorce understand, there's a duplicity effect of energy, and there's new people being introduced in relationship with your parents, and there's a lot of identity crisis going on. And who am I? Where do I fit? I've spent my whole lifetime trying to figure out my roots in my family, and now that's kind of in two. And so I was a college student looking for answers for my family's story, and I ended up finding answers in my career path as well. So I went to TCU. I was a TCU Horned Frog. I'm very proud to wear purple. And Coach Prime, you may have gotten us once, but you won't get us twice. No, my husband actually went to CU, so we do conflict really well because that day was really fun. But all joking aside, sometimes things happen in life that are circumstance and or circumstantial and providential. And I think that's where my path toward TCU really was. I didn't know that I needed interpersonal communication strategies and training, but that's where I landed in a freshman seminar class that I just had to have for one of those general credits that you get in college. And I was equal parts excited and equal parts angry when my professor started speaking about data and patterns and communication styles that's proven in the research to make relationships work and to make relationships fail, because I was 18 and I was wondering why this was the first time that I was hearing this. And I started thinking, man, if my family had this, if my friend groups had this, if our workplace relationships had these resources that I was being exposed to in a communication studies class, I think we'd be better off as human beings because we'd be more connected and more equipped to do relationships well. And so a happenstance freshman seminar sign up that I really didn't even have authority to choose for myself on that fall semester is really what drove my desire to make my career and my future family more safeguarded around being present with and aware of tools that could actually break a cycle of division in relationship that I was walking through with my family at the time.
Wow, it's so beautiful how you talk about just like entering your freshman year, you picked this school, and then this class was kind of part of your freshman semester. And then through it, in the content, I'm sure the delivery of the content was important, like it resonated with you and just sparked this like, what if our family had these skills for communicating and setting boundaries and being effective listeners? Like, what could our family have been like? Or what if my parents stayed together? I mean, I can just imagine as an 18-year-old young woman, all the thoughts just kind of downloading in that course. And then the beauty that inspired in you to like do something with this, right? Like to unpack it even more and to dive deep into it and realize it's not just your family that could benefit from all these skills, but wow, every one of us is in a relationship, right?
Absolutely. And I think relationship education as a whole is a term that people are very unfamiliar with. They think of relationship skills as couples counseling or marriage therapy. And we forget that relationships are well beyond the romantic context and human experiences. We have relationships with our friends, we have relationships with our neighbors, we have relationships with a person who we encounter who's helping us bag our groceries. And we don't learn relationship skills through osmosis, but no one's teaching them until post-grad studies. And if they are, it's disguised or guised as usually a health class or a sex ed class, which is quite off-putting because that's obviously not the only or most important place to learn these tools. And so I had a lot of epiphanies, a lot of vision and direction. And before my career here at the Center for Relationship Education, I actually worked in a youth kind of mentoring agency that was really near and dear to my heart, and had close to a decade of experience in that organization. And that was all based on relationships, and realized that even their training, their onboarding, the conferences we went to lacked a directive path to acquire skills to do relationships well. And what you know about relationship patterning is that we learn from those around us. And for people like me who are in these cycles of patterns of communication that weren't necessarily visually toxic, but that obviously had a deleterious effect on the long-term commitment of my parents' marriage, were really impossible to break without interjecting new tools. And so some really great and meaningful work has come out of my own personal experience, and my family's legacy has been able to be kind of put back in a place of in a path of helping heal thousands and helping be proactive on the front end, rather than the crisis intervention we typically explore when oftentimes it's too late.
Mm. And you co-authored a book with your mother about relationship essentials, right? You created this book. It's this whole toolbox full of relationship skills. And so talk to us a little bit about how that went. Like after the pain of divorce and then kind of peeling back the layers and looking at, some of the breakdown in communication and boundaries and things like that. It's just inspiring that, through that process, then you and your mother could write a book together about all of this.
Well, it's such a humbling journey to be an author, and two time. I mean, I was actually, my speaking opportunities led to a publication of my first book called In Their Shoes, which was about a child's journey to accept, the blended family experience after divorce. And my literary agent actually called me post reentry right after COVID and just said, "Hey, we're experiencing in the author world, there's this really big lack of content for how to connect and how to reconnect. And and what to do, and practical and tangible and tools. And he was using all the vernacular and the words that are lived and breathed at our company. And my mom actually is the founder of the Center for Relationship Education and is actually retiring this week. It's a really celebratory legacy that we're celebrating, and I'll be taking the reins. This Friday is her official retirement date, so we're celebrating a lot of legacy. And when my agent said, "Do you know anything about relationship skills and tools and practical application?" I said, "Do you know what we do at CRE? We're a curriculum and certification company, and we live and breathe on taking theory of communication and rolling it out into framework and tools that anyone can apply, no matter what age and stage you are and what type of relationship you're in." And, all these light bulbs went on, and I was actually going to put pen to paper, and I realized very quickly, this publication wouldn't feel complete if I didn't include the legacy of my mom. And so we started dreaming a little bit and storyboarding, and I had the tools analogies in my core because I'm a very metaphorical thinker. And then she and I helped, daydream about some of our life experience and the stories that we've seen in our work vocationally and in our family life. And it was actually 6 weeks later. I wrote that book in 6 weeks because I remember the manuscript was due right after Christmas. And I don't know how it happened, but it came to publication last fall, and it's been a really fun tool to be able to socialize what we've done for 20 years here in our business, but in a more tangible entry point, just because a book is a little bit easier to digest than a full-on curricula that educators train in the schools.
Yes. So at the Center for Relationship Education, you are training teachers, people in the corporate world on how to communicate more effectively, this whole toolbox of relationship skills that you have in the book. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm holding this up so you can see a copy of her book. But that is what you primarily do, is you teach and train other people on how to incorporate these skills into their relationships in the workplace, in schools, and all of this.
Yes, you nailed it. We had an awareness of needing to scale, because direct services and guest speakers for how to do relationships well are lovely. But we wanted to create a movement, and a proactive and preventative movement for human connection that is really, really important. Even the Surgeon General most recently released a statement about an epidemic that is most concerning to public health, and it is isolation and loneliness is what is really the world's biggest problem and it's a public health crisis. He calls it an epidemic. And I can share that link to the article if it would be helpful for your listeners at a later time. But the idea of what do we do about this isolation? What do we do about this disconnection has typically lived in theory and data, which we live by, and we really want to operationalize terms and principles that are relevant and data-driven and evidence-based. And so what ended up happening was in the early days of our curriculum development, we were focused primarily on adolescent relationships and their kind of transition from friendship to dating, and how those foundational principles of learning to process conflict, learning to figure out how you're made, your personality temperaments, the things that drive you, how that could be a topic of discussion, and how you could grow in those resources and tools. And what we found was that there was a lot of data, but there weren't a lot of activities to make the concepts tactile and tangible. And that is really where I think my mom and I have shined and will continue to lead, is that we can take theory, as you saw in the presentation where you observed me speaking theory about what makes relationships work, and then put it into a conversation topic or resource, a tool that's accountable, that's actionable, that's memorable, and that you can teach truly from a kindergartner all the way through an aging parent. It's limitless, the amount of productivity that can happen when you fill your toolbox that was previously empty with relationship skills. So we do have a trainer track of certification for all the different tracks of our relationship curricula, starting from school-based learning in the classroom all the way through, you mentioned our workplace relationship curricula for HR or learning and development managers. anyone who is looking to inject and interject interpersonal skills and strategies could benefit from the replicable services that we offer through that certification model.
I love it. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat in your talk and in your book, Relationship Essentials, are the analogies. And I too am a metaphorical thinker. I cannot fully unpack something until I have made an analogy about that concept in my own mind. And it could be something totally silly, but for me, it really resonates. And so I love how you did that in the book. It sounds like that's what you're doing out in schools too, is you talked about, I think you mentioned being in a classroom of teens talking about, going from friendships to a dating relationship and how you engaged those teenagers in activities and exercises to practice these communication skills and boundary setting skills. And I was like, oh my goodness, this needs to be in every single school and everyone's home, like this practical way. And you take out the like scariness of relationships. You just really have a way of being able to kind of diffuse the anxiety around, setting healthy boundaries. And so maybe talk to us a little bit about, what you've seen, that the success that you have seen when you have implemented this with teens in a school setting or maybe in a community setting.
I'm so glad you asked. We just actually had a really opportune milestone moment on our staff. One of our team members who's been training in the schools and teaching through a lot of our federally funded projects and some of our private funded projects in Northern Colorado has had an impact on the legacy of so many lives. And he's chosen, after 20 years working with CRE, is moving a different direction. And we got to create a tribute video of all of the people that were in either a middle school or high school classroom learning from the Real Essentials curricula that he brought through our agency. And when I was just talking with him briefly after he saw the video tribute, it was a surprise, and he was very touched and overwhelmed by all the gratitudes that people had communicated. And the thing that he shared that stood out the most was he said, Lauren, these people are adults and they have their own children now. And I met them in 8th grade, and they use the skills that I taught in 8th grade to guide their dating conversations and to build a foundation of trust and empathy and collaboration. And it was so honoring to see that what we do, I may have been a guest speaker for 10 days in a classroom, or I may have trained a teacher to bring it into their humanities studies or their interpersonal strategies class. And it was so rewarding to see the long-term impact. And that story is not an original one, in that anyone who has encountered our story and been impacted by the Relationship Essentials programming and the curricula that we offer, it is one of those sound bites that echoes in our brains that immediately, this is a class that I wish everyone had. Where were you when I was 15 is what all the teachers and leaders in HR say that go through our certification process. And what's fascinating is you wouldn't believe the amount of barriers that exist in an educational setting that would prohibit space and time to be given to these types of lessons, because relationship skills are seen as common sense or as soft skills or as, something that they already cover. And the data of an American teenager would strongly disagree with those statements. We're seeing heightened depression. 1 out of every 6 kids that we encounter are known to struggle with some sort of anxiety or depression. That number is being projected and trending to go to 1 in every 3 in the next 5 years. And if we don't do something quickly and recognize that relationships are the foundation of learning, they're the foundation of confidence, they're the foundation of connection, which is the human experience, then no matter how wonderful our Common Core math curricula is, these kids are suffering and their futures are at risk. And so we are really on a mission to advocate for preventative relationship skills training and stop the stigma that it's only about relationships in romantic settings and it's only for adults and it's only for a certain population group. No, this is a human experience, and you would be shocked at how many layers of red tape exist to get relationship education, any funding, any attention, any time in the school setting.
I would not be shocked. I totally believe that, and it saddens me deeply. I mean, as a therapist and as a mom, I just know the impact it has on kids to focus solely on what they call the core curriculum, right? Math, science, social studies, and leave out these really important courses like relationship skills and communication and boundaries. I mean, just like you said, this is, one in every six, one in every three kids has some sort of depression and anxiety. Well,
Mhm.
what is that from? It's because of the relationships that they're involved in and being confused about how to navigate them, right? It's the confusion that's going on within their own bodies and minds that they don't have the words to express themselves and to ask for help and assistance. And it's mind-boggling to me that you do have to jump through so much red tape to get this infused into the curriculum because like you said, it should be just one of the basics, and it is in some schools. I know a lot of Montessori schools and stuff are really, keen on, expression and assertiveness and using your words and being a great listener and things like that. But um, I'm really, really hopeful that through your efforts that this can be part of the standard curriculum at schools for sure. But I was just thumbing through your book, and an example of something just that everybody needs to, know how to do. On page 115 of your relationship essentials book is the forgiveness formula. And it's like, what? Of course, there's a gratitude superpower. Like just good stuff in here that needs to be taught to kids and for kids to be able to practice the forgiveness formula, I mean, just simple things like this that I guess, like you said, we just take for granted. And then all of a sudden you're an adult and you're supposed to know how to admit when you're wrong, apologize, and properly ask for forgiveness.
Yes. And acknowledge that even if your intent was good, even if you didn't mean to do something, your action still impacted someone in a negative way. And the humility and sacrifice it takes to actually say the words, you know what, I was wrong. And I do recognize that my actions impacted you. And for that, I'm sorry. We, as parents, we run around, we say you're sorry. Say, your brother hit you. And yeah, I got toddler to teenager in my house. I'm no stranger to the I'm sorry dialogue. One of the things that we try and practice is if I'm not using the tools in my own life, then you're not going to see the results that we expect in the public sector. And so there's a spotlight on my own accountability every day as a mom, as a partner, as a friend, as an employee. And I am so grateful that I've been equipped with the tools that give me resources. And I always say I'm standing on level ground. I don't like to speak from a stage. I like to speak from the same level of wherever I am, because we're all in this together. And if you don't apply the tools, nothing gets built. And so speaking to the forgiveness formula, that was something that just came out of structuring an apology with all components that are necessary to really feel seen and validated. And it's something that you practice with sincerity, but it takes a lot of clarity and context to understand. And it stems from a place of, you know what, it's okay to say, not just say you're sorry, because you're sorry is so empty if it doesn't have meaning. But in my children know all of these tools, and I'm hopeful that it won't put them into therapy as they get older. Although I'm such a component and if you could sign me up to go to counseling every day, I'm in, because I actually do love it. And I think that's a stigma we also need to stop, is that therapy is not a marker of something that's wrong. It's a marker of your desire to learn and grow. And I think every human deserves that. And so I am pro counselors, and we are partnering with a lot of therapists around the country who can be on that crisis intervention stage with us. But the forgiveness part of, if my kids are in a spat and my middle is picking on his little sister, Or it's usually the other way around. Usually the littlest one is picking on him because she's fiery and feisty. I'll say, don't just say you're sorry. Say, hey, I was wrong for hitting you with a remote control. And I realized that left a mark on your arm and that hurt you. For that, I am sorry. And would you offer me your forgiveness? And then they have to actually decide if they're ready to say, yes, I forgive you. But typically, if you acknowledge their pain, it's a lot easier than them forgiving you just for saying sorry, because they're rarely sorry unless they feel the weight of compassion and empathy. And I think it's imperative to know how to do this well as kids and as adults. I mean, gosh, I used it this weekend with something that happened in my own relationships that I needed to say, you know what, my intent was good, but the impact obviously left some wounds, and I need to address that, and I need to humble myself and practice what we teach. And it just kind of releases you to say, okay, I acknowledged the hurt that I either unintentionally or intentionally caused, and I'm going to leave it up to you to extend that same grace.
Mm. And why is the forgiveness piece so important? I mean, because I think when parents are going and blowing and they're just, things are happening quickly in the home, you're making dinner and someone hurts someone else and you just yell out, you better say you're sorry. Like what does the forgiveness side really do for them?
Well, it's such a important part of reconciliation. I think the word reconciled in its origin is peace and trust and understanding. And those are the things that the human spirit needs to thrive and feel safe and grow. And every time that we live through something that's irreconciled or irreconcilable, it wounds a mark of trust. It takes the core competencies for relational safety, for vulnerability, for authenticity, and it smudges the ecosystem in which is required to live. And so forgiveness is actually a vitally important part of reconciliation, because it's an acknowledgement of the relationship. It's not protecting the ego, it's protecting the people. And I
Mm.
think so much of this self-care, self-awareness, self-concern, self-focus, iPhone generation is well-intentioned, but it's ruining our capacity for reconciliation, because you're actually taught to prioritize self over others. But relationship in its meaning is two or more people. You can't have a relationship with yourself because that's selfish. You can be aware of self, you can have knowledge of self, and all of that's good. But until you encounter another human, you're not in relationship. You're in isolation. And that's the problem. And so when you ask, how does forgiveness lead to, why is it vitally important, is because it is the agent toward reconciliation, so that two or more human beings can live in peace and in trust and in vulnerability. And we've lost that art in this current social ecosystem that I'm observing, because everyone is so self-protective and self-focused that we don't care about the other person. And
Mm.
we've been actually celebrated for not caring about the other person. You do you, don't worry about your impact, don't there. And we're so gratified in protecting our ego that we're destroying our relationships.
Oh, you're so right. You do you. And you know what? That's on you. You hear people say that. That's on you.
Sure. Yeah, it might be, but it actually is affecting an us. There's always others. No matter how small your decision, every choice you make, that's what something we teach here at CRE, is every choice you make has an impact, regardless of if you want it to or not, right? If you choose to pay in cash at Starbucks instead of using your app, you're going to slow down that traffic line. And if you drop the quarter through the drive-through line, you're going to perhaps make someone late to work. You're not thinking about your choice to pay in cash and how it impacts the drive-through line. But from that small to, the things that you post on your social media, the words that you use to describe yourself, either in a public forum, in a private setting, what you choose to make for dinner has an impact on, the health and well-being of your kids and the people that you're serving. And I think we're so gratified, and I don't care what you think, that we've lost care, and then we're not caring for ourselves, because the best self-care is to honor and love others ahead of yourself. But
Mm,
man, there's not a lot of models of that in our current society.
so true. I mean, serving others is the highest form of love, right? Is to be there to anticipate needs and to serve. Now, that can get twisted when you're talking to a mom, a real dedicated mom, right?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Where
It
it's
is
like,
not, it's not abuse of your roles and responsibilities. It's not a thankless, you're my servant. It's more of a, hey, I always like to think back when you're stuck in that, especially I'll speak from the mom lens here, because we can, I know there are listeners that are moms who work at home exclusively, moms who work in the home exclusively, moms who work in an office setting, and every role that we hold in that mom world, in my experience, feels thankless at some point in time. And for many of us, it's most of the time. It feels like no one sees the amount of service that we're doing. And our psyche changes a little bit from infancy to teenagers, if we're honest. And if you think back to whatever your story that made you a mom, whether that was through you were a birth mom, or whether an adoptive mom, or it was in a hospital or in a birthing center, or in a tub in the woods somewhere, all of us become moms in our human experience and hold this newborn that we had the pleasure of bringing into the world in a very painful way. That pleasure and pain is a mix. But as soon as we see that breath of that child, it's as if our heart explodes with a desire to serve. I don't know any new mom or old mom that looks at that newborn and that infancy and that bonding moment and says, I don't want to love you well. I don't want to get you milk. I don't want to change your diaper. I don't, you know, most of them would probably agree, I don't want to lose sleep, but we'll give and take there. But most of us, it's almost like we're compelled in our humanity to serve. And by doing so, it fills that cup and it makes us feel so valued and valuable. And along the way, we lose that gift and privilege of serving, and it becomes an obligation, and it becomes a duty, and it becomes sometimes overbearing, and we push our limits and our boundaries and our capacities, and we feel like we can't ask for help, or we shouldn't ask for help, or we don't disseminate all of the tasks to the community that is designed to serve us, because that would be self-serving. And then we convince ourselves that the only way to be strong as a woman is to be independent. And that is the furthest from the truth. The most strength we get, especially as women and moms, is an interdependence. A society that says, I need you and you need me. And if we can vocalize and verbalize our needs without feeling needy and within a healthy boundary setting system, we are going to thrive and flourish. And that's really the metaphor that brings inspiration and motivation and vision and my experience. And you mentioned that my whole life, other than my tenure at TCU, has been in Colorado. And we are right on the precipice of my very favorite season, which is when all the aspen trees change their color and bring this awe and wonder and beauty that just makes me want to pull over the side of the road and just marvel at the blue sky against that crisp aspen forest. And this is just a metaphor. I write about it in Relationship Essentials, and I've been speaking a lot about it just in the relevance of the season. And, in our landscaping, in our little Castle Rock backyard, we have one single aspen tree that's alive and well and flourishing, and it's got strong roots, and it's not, it's watered, and every fall about this time the green leaves turn yellow and then they fall off, and winter comes. And you know what has never happened when I walk outside in my backyard and I stare at that aspen tree when it's changing? I'm never awestruck. I never even pay attention to it because it's by itself. But I'll tell you, when I get in my car and I drive on west on I-70 and fight that annoying traffic like all of us do, and I see rabbit ears pass or ute pass that have hundreds of thousands of aspens changing together, that's when life is breathtaking. That's when beauty strikes, and that's when we are changed. And the coolest thing about aspen trees is that they actually are the world's largest single living organism because hundreds of thousands of trees share the exact same root. And when we talk about interdependence versus independence, I like that metaphor because it's so powerful and memorable to say, what's beautiful about being a strong and independent woman who doesn't need anybody and who says, get off my lawn when people do offer to help? Nothing is beautiful about that. It's exhausting, it's draining, it's self-serving, and it's really not, it's not awe-inspiring, that's for sure. But what's inspiring to me is to see how my village helps get 3 kids to 3 different schools with 3 different car lines and no buses that pick up at 3:30 and still maintain 2 working parents and a semblance of presence with my kids. That's what is beautiful.
Lauren, I'm glad you brought that up because that was just on my mind that when we ran into each other a couple weeks ago, you were saying, oh my gosh, this is just a crazy season in parenting where I have 3 kids going to 3 different schools. And, as in my personality type, it's sometimes difficult to ask for help and accept help. And I said, oh, I'm the same way. It's just so difficult. But when you allow people to serve you, it's just such a gift. It's a gift to them for being able to help in a situation where maybe they can't help otherwise. But it's also a gift to us to be the recipients of that help, right?
Sure. And it's funny when we survey audiences, we ask one of the lessons and the modules that we teach has a practical application for that. What are some of the barriers that prohibit us from asking for help? And then we contrast with that with what are the benefits of receiving help? And what's interesting is there's so many benefits to helping and receiving help, yet the barriers keep us from benefiting from it. And help has become a word instead of service. It's become a word of maybe a stigma that if you need help, then you're not enough, right? If you need help, then you are limited in your capacities. And man, couldn't be further from the truth. If you need help and you receive help, your capacities grow, right? The help that you're able to receive frees you to do other things, and it serves those that care to help you in feeling gratified that you use them as part of your community. And there's nothing more beautiful than when people serve one another. But I feel like the only people that we are allowing ourselves to serve in the human experience right now is ourselves. And it's a pretty ugly picture.
So true. And sometimes our kids, we're thinking like, this is just our priority. We've got to serve our kids and, we've got to get our own needs met. But it's really possible to weave it all in without feeling like you're overwhelmed, because one of the things that you said that really resonates with me is just how it really fills you up to serve another person. And I've noticed in my own life, if I'm feeling really anxious or just kind of down in the dumps, or I just feel kind of blah, I take a little inventory and it's like, Jordan, when's the last time that you did something for someone? Outside your community. Maybe it's a neighbor. I love to bake banana bread in the fall. And so it's like, get the mixer out, bake some banana bread, and go take it to someone.
I'll take a loaf.
Yes, I'll give you one. I just baked 2 this weekend without
Lovely.
eggs for a special mama in our community. But
I love that.
If you are finding yourself in this place where you're just going, what's wrong? What's going on with me? Try something practical and simple. Try serving someone. Try gifting somebody something, even writing a note or just knocking on their door and surprising them and say, hey, let's sit down and chat. Do you have a minute? Like, you will notice how you rally and you come back and you kind of find that, that joy back in yourself, and it gives you that leverage and that energy to keep going.
Sure. And if you don't cultivate a place to need someone, then people don't feel like they want to be a part of your community because you never utilize their gifts and their service talents. And then when you do need them, I think this is what we're seeing in a really, really tragic and hard suicide epidemic among our teenagers and a lot of adults as well, is that by the time their need is felt, it's really, really grave. And it's so shame inducing to ask for help at that point that they feel like the only way out is really, really is loss. It is tragic and it is heartbreaking and it's real and relevant. And we need to cultivate a society that can ask for simple help and receive it well. And I mean, I'll just use my husband and I as an example. I'm 5'0". Some people say I'm 4'11", but I've been measured and I'm 5 feet tall. And my husband's 6'1", and I always say I married up, in a joking
I
way
love
because
it.
I'm small and he's tall. But what's so interesting is for the first probably 5 years of our marriage, I would wheel this bulky, chair from our desk over to the refrigerator, and in my, stiletto heels, try and balance on this chair to get to the cabinet above our refrigerator to pack the kids' lunches. And, my husband's sitting there in the kitchen just staring at me, watching me, giggle and say, hey, I can reach without the pomp and circumstance of the chair. And it's probably a safer solution because you look like you're going to fall half the time trying to balance on that desk chair with wheels on our wood floor. And I tell that story because it's so simple that why wouldn't I think just to turn around and say, hey, babe, can you grab, the pretzels from above the fridge? And I think it's because I grew up in a ecosystem of education that said, unless you do everything by yourself, you suck. And that's so not true. We tell married couples all the time, if you didn't have need for each other, then why would you marry? Why would you partner off if you didn't need each other? So verbalize your needs and say, I would love to help you meet that. Because otherwise, we're just a bunch of isolated, independent, grumpy people who aren't able to serve in the giftings that we've been given.
Yes, I can relate to your example of, just trying to do everything possible myself and then waiting till the very last minute, usually after there's been some catastrophe. Oops, I've spilled the paint or knocked over the ladder or whatever it is, to go, Josh, can you help me now? And he's like, can you just ask me to do this before it gets to this point? Because I'd love to help, but I don't know if you don't ask me. And so that's part of this relationship essentials, right? Is being able to recognize your limits, include and ask people in your network to help you and be grateful for their help, right?
Sure. And if you're worried about the word help, if that's too much of a ask right now, we found a lot of goodness in changing the word to can you help me to hey, I could use your support.
Mm,
And because it seems to be maybe a softer help is kind of this emergency, I'm in trouble, whereas support is oh, I'd love to support you. Everybody wants to be supportive. And so if you want a baby steps method and you're not willing to ask for help, maybe say, hey, I could really use your support. Could you, and then fill in the blank. I just realized we're both married to a Josh. We didn't have that conversation, but my husband's name is also Josh. So that's really
look
fun.
at that. I love it. And you have boys and a girl, two boys and a girl?
Girls and a boy. I have a 13-year-old
Okay.
old daughter, a 10-year-old boy, and a 4-year-old daughter.
Okay. Oh, yes. From toddler to teen, you've got the
Yes.
whole range of
Preschool,
communication.
elementary, and middle school, all in different places.
Well, okay, I have to ask the communications expert. So you have toddler to teen. Is there a dramatic difference on how you talk to your 4-year-old versus how you talk to the 13-year-old?
That is such a good question. And I would say other than age appropriateness for topical analysis, I would say no. Since all of my children were born, we have had where they can process communication as if they are, we didn't do baby talk, we didn't do code words, we didn't do anything that was, we weren't secretive about our why. We clarified everything from here's the boundary around this decision, here's the result of this decision, here's the consequence if necessary of this decision. And I only knew how to do that by following the principles of what my mom had taught me with incrementalism, because a lot of people, I think, assume that with each life stage of their children, they can then jump into a different methodology to parent them. And I think I've found a lot of synergy in some of those rocky transitions, because the expectations and responsibilities, although different, for example, my youngest, Nina, she's 4. When I tell her to clean her room, it has a different variance of result than what I expect from my 13-year-old. She can do the mirrors with the spray, and my oldest daughter does her own laundry. And so there's a different level of expectation and responsibility, but both of them can and should be cleaning their room. And, for Nina, it's putting all of her shoes in her basket. It's putting her stuffies on her bed. It's pulling her comforter up and watching with cuteness to see how proud she is of her, somewhat flat bed sheets. And we didn't wait to start integrating the room cleaning until they were 10, 11, 12, because we knew that that was a social responsibility. And all of us have cleaning responsibilities in our house. And I think the same is true of conflict and consequence and choices. And, you can't start with a toddler who's a picky eater and say, I'm just going to do all the Cheerios and applesauce packets because you won't eat anything else, and then expect when they're teenagers and they're practicing for football that they would have a well-balanced protein diet. You have to start patterning those expectations early, so that as their brain is developing with you in that kind of chronological, logical order, they've already caught up to what their expectations are, and it's not this shock wave of change. And so I just am really grateful that my mom was so intentional to show me that. And I had the partnership of Josh to enter in and always talk to our kids as if they were little adults, but using words and language that were appropriate for their psyche.
You're speaking our language over here. That's what Team Langdon has always been about with our kids. And in fact, when they were little, people would often say, they're just like little mini adults. And it's like, well, that's what they're going to be one day. And so
Sure.
we're
Yeah.
training them to be what they're going to be and to do well at that, And so I think it's important to, not baby talk to them, to challenge them to next level things, even at young ages, because it creates such courage and confidence in them. I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she said, oh, my daughter just seems just really angsty and just like nothing satisfies her. And she's 12 or 13 years old. And I said, you know what? In our experience with kids, when they go through kind of a phase where they just seem frustrated all the time, or kind of going through this depression, or just, that angsty kid stage that they go through, I said, it's usually because they don't know how to articulate this or communicate this with words. But what's happening internally is that they understand the potential, their own potential, and they're not being challenged to the next level of that potential. So for example, we talk about at our house, like, it seems like our boys are getting a little bit bored, and they've got that angst going on. What's the next thing that we could challenge them to do?
Hmm.
This Saturday, let's get under the car, pull the plug on the oil, let it drain, and show them how to change the oil in the car. And it's like, after they've done something that's kind of that next level up, they snap out of that. They're just like full of confidence and courage because they've been equipped with some skills that they were just kind of in a stagnant place with, and so then it just kind of moves them to the next level. So I think that goes hand in hand with, communicating, using regular terms for things, not making up, pet names for your body parts, or, keeping secrets and things like that, just communicating with him on a regular level.
Yes. Well, and regular, obviously you need age appropriate language or age appropriate things. And I would use a news story, for example. When all of this really, really frustrating and sad and hard violence against kids in school, has been prolific in Colorado. I remember when the STEM event happened just a couple years ago, and Josh and I sat down and said, okay, we have a late elementary schooler, and we have kind of a second grader, and then, Nina was super little, couldn't even use her own language then. We had a different storyline that was appropriate for each of them, and so for Leah, it was my oldest, somebody at a school made a decision that threatened the lives and caused harm to their peers. And it's devastating, and we're sad, and people were killed, and it makes us so angry. And for Jace, it was hurt. We recognize there's this news story where somebody was hurting, a student was hurting, and they chose to hurt other people to try and get through that pain. And it wasn't a happy ending. Right. And for Nina, it was you don't even know how to put sentences together yet. So we'll have that conversation with you as you get older, but it's not like, oh, only Leah can hear about it, or only Jace is going to get these. It's trying to figure out what is the right language to communicate the same message, and so that everyone's informed and everybody's exposed to figure out how to cope with that, how to process it, how to name the emotions that it stirs. And if we don't practice that, then if they hit 17 and we're worried why they're stomping out of the house and never engaging in vulnerable conversation, it's probably because you haven't integrated them into vulnerable conversations in the earliest stages of their lives.
So true. You got to start young with that, but it is important that they have age appropriate conversations. And I think it's interesting, again, in my own experience, I just noticed that if you allow your kids to lead these conversations and you listen really carefully to the types of questions they're asking about these types of events, you can easily discern what they're ready for, the level of conversation that they're ready for. And some of your kids might surprise you, and that's okay. They may be ready for really mature conversations at 8. I've got one of
Sure.
those.
Yeah.
My daughter, she's always asking more and more in-depth questions. And it's like, if she's asking these, I'm going to answer them honestly. I might not go into real detail about some of them if I think that it could have a negative consequence, but let kids lead in some of these situations. It'll make it easier on you. And then you can also bounce these ideas off your friends, right? Your community, where you say, oh, my daughter asked me this, or my son's inquiring about this. How did you handle this? Because it doesn't need to be answered immediately. It's not a crisis. You can pause and say, I'll get back to you on that. But using your community of friends to say, how did you handle this?
Definitely. And I would like to think that I know everything that's happening in my own kids' lives. We've already had the conversation. Hey, mom and dad can't know it all. We think we know it all. We want to know it all, but I need you to teach me what you're learning and what you know from your peers, from your coaches, from your teachers, because I want this ecosystem of trust to be solid, rock solid, so that when the consequences get more severe, if it's a different conversation if I'm worried about my kid getting behind the wheel and having been exposed to alcohol at a high school party. That consequence of not telling me the behaviors they were part of is much more grave if I haven't talked about, did you steal that pack of gum from King Soopers when you were 5, at the checkout line? And what are the consequences of you being dishonest, and how did that affect our trust? And so it's always the letting out more, you're loosening the boundaries as the freedoms grow and the responsibilities grow with that. But you have to start with everything kind of locked down. And what you're saying is beautiful. Just, hey, teach me what you know, teach me what you're thinking about, because questions are so much more stimulating in conversation than statements. They allow deep thinking, they allow connection, they allow ponderance. And I think as parents, we assume that we're just supposed to have all the statements and just state them and end them with a period with no discussion. And we do have the authority and we should be guiding our kids. They shouldn't be parenting us. That's a whole different psychological problem. But parenting doesn't mean that we're authoritative in everything we do, and we never admit when we're wrong, and we never admit that we don't know something, and we invite them to teach us as much as they're learning from us.
100%. Such golden nuggets. Thank you, Lauren. I'm so glad that you joined us on the show.
It's been a fun conversation. Time's really gone fast.
I know. I could talk to you for like 3 hours. I totally could. And I know how busy parents are. How they put their earbuds in and they're like, I have to catch the rest of the show, in my workout tomorrow.
Well, good. We hope to see you tomorrow if you start again.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, where can people find you if they want to kind of dig more into your books and the Center for Relationship Education? Where can they locate you?
Well, CRE's website is the first place that I would start. It's a wealth of knowledge. It has all of our direct staff links. I am certainly not the only person in our office that gets all this magic done. And we have 18 full-time staff that are crushing life and helping us, scale across the country. And so my relationship center, that's MY and then the word relationship, CENTER.org is the CRE website. If you go to the About Us, tab, you'll find all of our people, and my direct email and contact is there if you'd like to reach out specifically. And then we also have the social channels at My Relationship Center for Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. You're out there on the social channels. You got your website, you got your organization, you've scaled this business to help people get and practically implement relationship skills. And that is hands down, like maybe the number one skill we need for the rest of our lives, right?
Yes, indeed. A lot of things change, but that is an unchanging thing, is that humans are supposed to be in relationship and thrive best when they're in healthy, non-toxic connections. And our goal is to give people resources that they didn't even know they needed to make sure that that happens.
Well, keep up the awesome work. That is a mission worth fighting for. And if we can support you in any other ways, please don't hesitate to let us know how we can serve you. Guys, I would recommend that you buy her books. One, I heard her speak. I went right up afterwards, bought both books, and then I bought 3 copies of the books because I knew right in my mind at that moment when you were talking, 3 people that could use this content and not use it like, oh, they're in such need, but it would just inspire them and validate them and give them some tools, especially the one about helping parents better understand and connect with children of divorce. I think it's really important that we know how to engage our friends who have gotten divorced with their kids and the language to use, how to help their children feel, trusted and warm and connected in relationships, because it's often an isolating time for kids. So grab a copy of her books. We've got them linked in the show notes right here. So just scroll down in the description and you should be able to order your books right away. Lauren, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you, Jordan. It was my pleasure. I hope we do get more time to talk offline. Let's do coffee or something. I'd like that.
Let's do it. And parents, if you are looking for something more directly, like coming soon, I should say, we are having our first parent coaching series that launches November 7th. So we are doing some group coaching. This is a new thing that we are doing. It blesses you so much to be in a small group with other parents who are rowing the boat in the same direction, really want to, learn skills for rekindling their relationship with their spouse, learning how to help their kids with next level responsibilities and inspire their kids to level up and really be joyful about pitching in and helping out in the household, like they're part of a team. And we just want to bless you with that. So go to our website, familiesofcharacter.com, check out our coaching opportunities, sign up for one of our classes, and we hope to serve you very soon in the coming months. So we will catch you on another episode of the Families of Character Show.